Robert Wone. On the night of August 2nd, 2006, Robert Eric Wone, a 32-year-old attorney and general counsel at Radio Free Asia, was staying overnight at a friend's home in Washington, D.C.'s upscale DuPont Circle neighborhood. He had known Joseph Price since their college days at the College of William and Mary. When Wone needed to stay in the city after working late, Price offered his row house at 1509 Swan Street, where he lived with his domestic partner, Victor Zaborski, and a third housemate, Dylan Ward. Wone arrived carrying his work belongings, expecting nothing more than a quiet night's rest before returning to his wife, Catherine, the following morning. At approximately 11:49 in the evening, Zaborski called 911 to report that an intruder had entered the home and attacked their guest. When first responders arrived at the row house, they found Wone lying face up on a pull-out sofa bed in a second-floor guest room. He had suffered 3 stab wounds to the chest, including one that had pierced his heart. Medical personnel recognized that Wone had likely been deceased for some time before the call was placed. But what investigators found at the scene was more disturbing than what they didn't find. The crime scene presented immediate contradictions. Despite the severity of Wone's injuries, there was virtually no blood at the scene. His body appeared to have been washed, redressed in a fresh t-shirt, and carefully positioned on the bed. The t-shirt showed no damage from the knife wounds that had killed him. All 3 housemates had recently showered when emergency medical technicians arrived and displayed what responders described as unusual calmness, given the circumstances they claimed had just occurred. Federal Bureau of Investigation fiber analysis revealed that the knife found at the scene contained fibers matching a towel near Wone's bed, suggesting blood had been wiped onto it rather than resulting from the attack itself. A knife was missing from a cutlery set in Ward's bedroom, one more consistent with the wounds Wone had sustained, and it has never been found. The autopsy revealed needle marks on Wone's neck, chest, foot, and hand. Some were surrounded by bruises indicating he had been alive when the injections occurred. Investigators theorized he had been incapacitated with an injected substance before being killed, though toxicology screens failed to detect any paralytic agents. Experts noted certain compounds metabolize rapidly and may become undetectable shortly after administration. How could someone be stabbed to death in a house with 3 people present, yet no one heard anything? How was the scene so clean when the wounds were so severe? Why did the evidence suggest Wone had been washed and redressed after his passing? And where was the knife that actually killed him? The row house had a sophisticated security system, yet no alarms had been triggered. There were no signs of forced entry at any door or window. Nothing of value had been taken. The back door, which the housemates claimed the intruder used, showed no evidence of tampering. A chime that would sound when that door opened had been intentionally disabled earlier that evening, according to security system logs. The 3 housemates were charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. At their 2010 trial, Judge Lynn Leibovitz acquitted all 3, but stated she personally believed the men knew who was responsible for Wone's passing, while not being convinced beyond a reasonable doubt of their involvement in the specific charges as legally defined. In 2011, Wone's widow Catherine filed a wrongful death lawsuit seeking $20 million. During depositions, all 3 defendants pleaded the Fifth Amendment to every question, including whether they had killed Robert Wone. The case settled for an undisclosed sum. The case received renewed attention with the 2023 Peacock documentary. Price, now Joseph Anderson, works in Miami. Ward, now Dylan Thomas, practices bodywork in Fort Lauderdale. 18 years later, the central questions persist. What happened to Robert Wone in those crucial hours? Who was responsible? And why has no one been held accountable? The next case takes investigators to the remote California desert, where 3 witnesses saw a teenager walking, then she vanished. Carly Guzay. On October 13, 2018, in the isolated White Mountain Estates area of Chalfont Valley, California, Carly Guzay vanished from her family's home after a night of extreme paranoia. The area was profoundly isolated, surrounded by vast expanses of high desert terrain. The White Mountains rose to the west. Death Valley lay to the south. 3 separate eyewitnesses saw her walking toward Highway 6 in the early morning hours, holding a piece of paper and looking up at the sky. Then she disappeared into the desert without leaving a trace, as if the landscape had swallowed her whole. The night before her disappearance, Carly had attended a gathering in nearby Bishop, about 15 miles from her home, where she consumed a substance with her boyfriend, Donald Arrowwood III. Her reaction was immediate and severe. She became intensely paranoid, exhibiting signs of extreme distress. She frantically texted her boyfriend asking if what they had used was altered, if something dangerous had been added to it. Her stepmother, Melissa Guzay, received a call about Carly's condition and drove to Bishop to collect her around 9 in the evening. During the drive back through the dark desert landscape, Carly remained profoundly agitated, unable to calm down despite Melissa's reassurances. Once they arrived home, Melissa spent hours with the terrified teenager. Concerned about Carly's mental state and wanting to document her condition, Melissa recorded approximately 8 minutes of their conversation. In these recordings, which would later be analyzed by investigators, Carly said disturbing things. She expressed fears that Melissa was going to harm her. She asked repeatedly if she would survive until the following day. She spoke about demonic imagery and dark thoughts flooding her mind. Melissa remained with her throughout these hours, trying to ground her in reality, reminding her that what she was experiencing was temporary. By 5:45 in the morning, as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Melissa observed that Carly finally appeared to be calming down. The intense fear was fading. She was able to hold brief, coherent conversations. Exhausted, Carly fell asleep in her bed, and Melissa also went to sleep. When Melissa woke around 7 that morning, Carly was gone. Her cell phone had been left on the kitchen counter. She had walked out without it, without identification, without any means to protect herself in the harsh desert environment where temperatures could swing between freezing nights and scorching days. 3 separate witnesses, none of whom knew each other and who came forward independently, stated they had seen Carly that morning walking near Highway 6. All 3 provided consistent descriptions. She was holding what appeared to be a piece of paper, looking down at it periodically. She was repeatedly looking up at the sky, her head tilted back, as if watching something overhead. The witnesses noted her behavior was unusual enough to be memorable. None stopped to offer assistance, something they would later express regret about. Search teams were deployed immediately. Tracking animals were brought to the home and given Carly's scent from her clothing. The animals picked up her trail and followed it toward Highway 6, tracking her path exactly as the witnesses had described. But at the highway, the scent trail vanished completely. The animals lost all trace of her. Despite a week-long search involving helicopters equipped with thermal imaging, over 60 search and rescue personnel, and multiple tracking animals working different sections, no trace of Carly has ever been found in the surrounding desert. The substance from the gathering was recovered and tested. The analysis came back negative for any adulterants or additives. It was exactly what it was supposed to be. Both Melissa and Zachary Guzay, Carly's biological father, voluntarily submitted to polygraph examinations. Both passed without any indication of deception. Cell phone data from all family members was analyzed and corroborated the family's account of the timeline and events. The evidence suggested the family had been truthful about everything they knew. In 2021, a witness came forward claiming to have seen Carly at a gathering in Tonopah, Nevada, approximately 100 miles away. Investigators reportedly located a vehicle that may have transported her from Highway 6. According to a 2023 documentary, a person connected to this information exists, and evidence has been processed, though no arrests have been made. The Federal Bureau of Investigation continues listing Carly as endangered missing, offering a $5,000 reward. Her family added $20,000. An age progression image released in 2022 shows what she might look like today. Carly would now be 22 years old. How does someone walk toward a highway in daylight, seen by 3 witnesses, and vanish completely? What happened after those witnesses saw her? And if someone picked her up from that highway, who was it and why? While Carly vanished in daylight, the next case involves a terrifying phone call made in the darkness on a Texas highway. Brandon Lawson. For over 11 years, Brandon Lawson's case captivated investigators because of one piece of evidence: a chilling 911 call in which he appeared to be running from someone or something in the dark Texas night. The audio was disturbing, fragmented, filled with genuine terror. In December 2024, his family finally received answers when remains found 2 years earlier were confirmed through DNA analysis as his. But the confirmation only deepened the mystery of what happened on that desolate highway. The 26-year-old oil field worker left his San Angelo, Texas home around midnight on August 9, 2013, following a disagreement with his longtime girlfriend, Ladessa Lofton. The argument was not unusual for the couple, but Brandon decided he needed space. He called his father, who lived in Crowley, approximately 170 miles north, saying he was driving up to visit. His father expected him to arrive in the early morning hours. Shortly after leaving San Angelo, Brandon called his brother Kyle with concerning news. He stated his truck had run out of fuel on Highway 277 near Bronte. But more alarmingly, he claimed people were pursuing him, trying to run him out of the area. Kyle, confused and worried, asked for clarification. Brandon repeated his plea for help, stating he had run out of gas and people were chasing him. The statement made no sense. Why would anyone chase someone whose truck had simply run out of fuel? Kyle told him to stay with the truck and that he would drive out immediately to help. At 12:50 in the morning, Brandon made a frantic 911 call that would become one of the most analyzed pieces of audio evidence in missing persons investigations. The call lasted less than 1 minute. Audio enhancement specialists later captured fragments of what he was saying. He stated he was in the middle of a field, alone in darkness. His truck had run out of fuel. There was one vehicle present. Someone was pursuing him through the wooded area. He pleaded for emergency responders to arrive quickly. The dispatcher asked if anyone had been hurt. The line went silent. Brandon never answered. When Kyle arrived at Brandon's abandoned truck approximately 15 to 20 minutes later, he immediately called Brandon's cell phone. Brandon answered. He told his brother that he could see him right there, that he was nearby and close enough to watch Kyle at the truck. He mentioned he was injured and bleeding, but provided no explanation. Kyle, standing alone on the dark highway next to Brandon's empty truck, looked around desperately trying to spot his brother. He called out Brandon's name repeatedly into the darkness. There was no response beyond the sound of wind and distant coyotes. A Coke County Sheriff's deputy arrived on scene shortly after Kyle. Together, they searched the immediate area using flashlights, calling Brandon's name, looking for any sign of him. They found nothing. Brandon had an outstanding warrant for possession of controlled substances. Investigators theorized that when Brandon saw the deputy's patrol vehicle arrive, he deliberately hid to avoid arrest. But this theory required believing Brandon would choose to hide from help he had requested when he claimed to be injured and bleeding. Brandon's phone transmitted its last cellular signal at 1:19 in the morning. After that moment, the phone went completely silent and never connected to any cell tower again. For over 11 years, despite extensive searches, no trace of Brandon was found. Volunteer search parties organized by his family combed the terrain around Highway 277 repeatedly. Professional search teams with specialized equipment were brought in. Tracking animals were deployed multiple times. Investigators obsessively reviewed the 911 call, bringing in audio forensic experts to analyze every second, desperately hoping for any clue. Then in February 2022, a private search team discovered clothing matching what Brandon wore. Texas Rangers expanded the search and discovered partial skeletal remains 300 yards from where his truck had been abandoned. On Christmas Day, 2024, DNA testing confirmed the remains were Brandon Lawson. The cause of his passing remains undetermined. His brother Kyle later revealed Brandon had used methamphetamine that night, suggesting possible paranoia. However, audio experts believe they hear a second voice in the 911 call. What happened in those crucial minutes between when Brandon called his brother and when his phone went silent? Was he running from real pursuers or from something his altered state created? A memorial service is scheduled for August 2025 in Burleson, Texas. While Brandon vanished on a dark highway, the next case presents something seemingly impossible captured on security cameras. Brian Schaffer. On the night of April 1st, 2006, Brian Schaffer's disappearance presented an impossible scenario that has baffled investigators for nearly 2 decades. Security cameras recorded the 27-year-old medical student entering the Ugly Tuna Saloon bar near Ohio State University campus in Columbus. The cameras captured him walking through the entrance with a timestamp visible. But those same cameras, which recorded continuously throughout the night, never captured him leaving the building. Every other patron was accounted for on exit footage. Every single person except Brian. He simply ceased to exist somewhere between the entrance and the exit. The Ohio State University medical student was in his second year, celebrating spring break just 3 weeks after losing his mother to a serious illness. He was still processing his grief while maintaining his demanding academic schedule. He met friends at the Ugly Tuna Saloon, a popular bar on the second floor of a commercial building. Around 10 in the evening, he called his girlfriend Alexis Wagoner to confirm their upcoming Miami vacation, which they had planned as a way for him to heal. The conversation was normal, filled with anticipation. They discussed final details and confirmed flight times. Then he returned to spending hours socializing with friends, enjoying the temporary escape from his grief and academic stress. At 1:55 in the morning, security cameras captured Brian in what would become the last known footage of him. He was standing outside the bar entrance, engaged in conversation with 2 unidentified women who have never been identified despite extensive efforts. The footage shows Brian appearing relaxed, smiling. Then he turned away from the camera and walked off frame, heading back toward the bar's interior. After that moment, Brian was never seen again by anyone. When the bar closed at 2 in the morning, Brian's friend Clint Florence could not locate him. Staff preparing to close had not seen him. Florence tried calling Brian's phone repeatedly. A text message sent at 2:10 in the morning asking where Brian was received no response. That text marked the last signal from Brian's phone, which never connected to any cell tower again. He missed his Monday flight to Miami, completely out of character for someone who was meticulous about commitments and had been excitedly looking forward to the vacation. Alexis reported him missing when he failed to arrive at the airport. Lead investigator Andre Edwards carefully examined all available camera recordings. He stated with complete certainty that Brian did not leave via the main entrance. The cameras captured every person who exited through that door throughout the entire night. Brian was not among them. The building had one service entrance leading to an active construction area. Investigators theorized Brian might have wandered into the construction area, perhaps disoriented, and exited through that route. But extensive searches, including tracking animals trained to detect human remains, found nothing. How does someone enter a building while being recorded on camera and then never leave while those same cameras continue recording? The cameras functioned properly throughout the night. Every other patron who entered was captured leaving. But Brian's exit was never recorded. Did he leave through the construction area and meet with foul play outside? Did something happen inside the bar? And why has no trace of him ever been found? The case took a turn when Brian's friend Clint Florence refused to take a polygraph examination requested by investigators. Acting on advice from an attorney he had hired, Florence declined the polygraph. He also declined further voluntary interviews beyond his initial statement. He subsequently moved to Tennessee. When approached by a reporter, Florence stated all questions should be directed to his legal counsel. Everyone else connected too. The case voluntarily took and passed polygraph examinations. Brian's father, Randy, never learned what happened to his son. He passed away in 2008 when a tree fell on him during a storm. After Randy's passing, someone signed his online memorial with a message purportedly from Brian, claiming to be alive in the United States Virgin Islands. Investigators traced the IP address to a public computer in Franklin County. The person was never identified. An age-progressed photograph released in 2021 shows what Brian might look like today at 42. The Federal Bureau of Investigation maintains his case in their missing persons database. Columbus police confirm the case remains open and is periodically reviewed, but acknowledge no substantive developments have occurred in nearly 19 years. The cameras show him entering. The cameras never show him leaving. And Brian Schaffer remains missing, lost somewhere between those two moments. While Brian vanished from a crowded bar, the next case involves a college student who disappeared from her own apartment. Hyun Jong Song. On November 1st, 2001, Penn State senior Hyun Jong Song, known as Cindy to her friends, disappeared from State College, Pennsylvania, after spending Halloween night celebrating with friends. She was last seen being dropped off at her apartment around 4 in the morning, still wearing portions of her costume. Physical evidence suggests she made it safely inside. Her false eyelashes had been carefully removed and placed on her bathroom counter. Her backpack from the evening was present in her bedroom. But at some point after arriving home, she apparently left her apartment again and vanished completely from the college town. 23 years later, her disappearance remains one of Penn State's most haunting unsolved mysteries. The 21-year-old South Korean-born student was majoring in integrative arts, a program combining visual arts, performance, and digital media. She was working 2 part-time jobs simultaneously while maintaining her full course load and remaining actively involved in multiple campus organizations. Despite this demanding schedule, she maintained strong grades and positive relationships. She had already registered for next semester's classes. She had placed an order for a new computer scheduled to arrive in 2 weeks. She had purchased Britney Spears' concert tickets. Everything in her life pointed to someone planning for a future. Someone who had goals and commitments. Someone who had no intention of disappearing. When Cindy failed to show up for work and missed classes without contacting anyone, which was completely out of character for someone known for being reliable. Concerned friends reported her missing on November 4th. Police responding found her apartment door securely locked with no signs of forced entry. The interior was orderly and undisturbed. Her purse was missing. Her wallet containing identification and credit cards was gone. Her apartment keys were nowhere to be found, but significantly, her cell phone remained in her backpack inside the apartment. The leading theory was that Cindy left her apartment in the early morning hours, perhaps planning to walk to a nearby 24-hour convenience store, and encountered her attacker en route. In 2003, 2 years after Cindy's disappearance, a disturbing connection emerged. A criminal informant came forward with a shocking claim. He alleged that 2 men had abducted Cindy from the street that night and kept her confined in a basement vault on a rural property until she passed away. The informant further alleged that one of the men had kept items from Cindy's Halloween costume as macabre mementos. When police searched the property in northeastern Pennsylvania that the informant identified, they made a horrifying discovery. They found 5 bodies buried on the property. However, despite extensive excavation and forensic examination, Cindy's remains were not among the bodies recovered. Informant's credibility came into question when investigators learned he had extensively researched Cindy's disappearance online before coming forward. This raised the possibility he had fabricated his story using publicly available details. One of the men mentioned by the informant, a violent career individual with a history of serious offenses, is now serving a life sentence in prison for other incidents. He was never charged with any offense related to Cindy's disappearance, but investigators have maintained him as a person connected to the ongoing investigation. In 2013, the Federal Bureau of Investigation worked with international agencies to facilitate obtaining genetic samples from Cindy's biological parents, who still resided in South Korea. These DNA profiles were entered into national databases, where they remain today, waiting to be compared against any unidentified human remains discovered anywhere in the country. Investigation remains open and active, though leads have grown increasingly sparse as years have passed. Detective Jonathan Mayer has made public statements indicating he thinks about Cindy's disappearance even during his personal time away from work, unable to fully disconnect from the mystery. What happened in those hours after Cindy returned home from Halloween celebrations and removed her costume? Why did she leave her apartment again without taking her cell phone? If she encountered someone she knew on the street, who was that person and why haven't they come forward? And if someone took her from that college town, where did they take her? 6 days before her disappearance, Cindy posted creative writing on her personal website. A poem filled with contradictions. The words now read like an eerie premonition, though she could not have known what awaited her. 23 years have passed since Cindy's song walked out of her state college apartment into the November darkness. Her family in South Korea continues to grieve without closure. Investigators continue to hope someone will come forward. And the truth about what happened to Cindy's song remains hidden, waiting to be discovered. While Cindy vanished from a college town, the next case takes us across the Atlantic to a small island where a teenager spoke chilling words. Damien Nettles. On November 2, 1996, Damien Nettles disappeared after a night out in Cowes, a small town on the Isle of Wight off England's southern coast. For nearly 3 decades, his case has been plagued by catastrophic investigative failures, critical evidence lost or destroyed, and persistent allegations of a cover-up involving local connections to controlled substances. Multiple witnesses saw Damien that night, Closed-circuit television cameras captured him at 12:02 in the morning, walking down High Street, his image preserved on grainy video. Then he walked beyond the camera's view, and nothing. 28 years later, not a single trace has been found on an island so small you can drive across it in less than an hour. The teenager had spent the evening attending a house gathering with friends, a typical Saturday night for young people in the small island community where entertainment options were limited. After the gathering ended, ferry back to Cowes where his family lived. Multiple witnesses who saw him during his journey later described him as appearing heavily intoxicated, stumbling slightly, having difficulty maintaining his balance. Some witnesses suggested he might have been under the influence of substances beyond beverages, noting his pupils appeared dilated and his behavior seemed off. As he made his way through the streets, multiple people observed him attempting to open doors of random parked vehicles, pulling on handles, peering through windows, behavior suggesting confusion or disorientation. At one point during his walk through town, Damien approached a witness who was sitting inside a parked vehicle. He walked up to the car window and said words that would later haunt everyone who heard them. He told the person in the car that they were being watched. The statement was cryptic, paranoid, strange. Who was watching? Why did Damien believe they were under observation? Was this substance-induced paranoia? Or had Damien actually noticed something real? After making this unsettling statement, Damien wiped condensation or rain off the vehicle's window with his hand, then turned and walked away toward High Street, disappearing into the November night. That witness would be among the last people to see Damien alive. The police investigation was catastrophically mishandled from the beginning. Officers responding made a critical error, incorrectly listing Damien's age in the system, recording him as an adult rather than his true age. This administrative error meant the case was not flagged for enhanced protocols automatically triggered for certain missing persons. Critical closed-circuit television footage from cameras around Cowes that might have captured Damien's movements after he walked past the camera on High Street was not preserved and was eventually recorded over or destroyed. Call logs showing what emergency calls came in that night were lost. Officer duty records and notebooks containing handwritten observations from the initial investigation disappeared from evidence storage. Hampshire Constabulary would later issue a formal public apology for the lost evidence. But apologies could not bring back the lost footage, the destroyed records, the missing pieces that might have solved Damien's disappearance decades ago. The primary theory involves a local individual deeply involved in the trade of controlled substances in the Cowes area. An informant with knowledge of the local underworld came forward with an account. According to this informant, this individual and Damien had a disagreement, possibly over substances or money, that escalated into a physical confrontation. During the altercation, the individual threw a strike that accidentally caused Damien's passing. Panicked, Damien's body was allegedly concealed for approximately 3 weeks in a location connected to illicit activity. A local counselor provided investigators with additional details stating Damien was taken to a bungalow, lost consciousness after the confrontation, and his body was wrapped in materials, including a rug and plastic bags, before being moved for final disposal. When the individual suspected of involvement passed away from a substance overdose in 2002, several people reported hearing rumors he had made some form of confession in his final moments. However, these reports were secondhand and could never be verified. In 2011, 15 years after Damien's disappearance, police arrested 8 different people on suspicion of involvement or conspiracy related to covering up what happened. However, all 8 individuals were eventually released without charges. Prosecutors determined there was insufficient physical evidence to proceed. Damien's mother, Valerie, eventually relocated from the Isle of Wight to the United States, settling near Dallas, Texas. From there, she has continued her campaign for answers, maintaining a Twitter website dedicated to Damien's case. In 2019, she published a book about her son's disappearance. In 2024, Canterbury Christ Church University's Cold Case Unit took on Damien's case for examination in partnership with Locate International. Despite their analysis, no breakthrough emerged. The Isle of Wight measures approximately 23 miles from east to west and 13 miles from north to south. You can drive from one end to the other in well under an hour. It is an island where communities are small, where everyone seems to know everyone else. Yet in 28 years, not a single physical trace of Damien Nettles has ever been found anywhere on that small island. No clothing, no remains, no personal belongings. What did Damien mean when he told that witness they were being watched? Who was the last person to see him alive after he walked past that camera? And if the informant's account is accurate, where was Damien's body ultimately taken? The Isle of Wight has kept its secrets about what happened to Damien Nettles for nearly 3 decades. While Damien vanished on a small island, the final case became an international mystery at a hotel with a dark history. Elisa Lam. In January and February 2013, Canadian tourist Elisa Lam became the center of an international mystery that captivated millions around the world. Her body was discovered in a water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, one of the city's most notorious buildings. Weeks before her body was found, surveillance footage from inside the hotel went viral, showing Elisa behaving in ways that seemed inexplicable, pressing elevator buttons frantically, hiding in corners, making unusual hand gestures, apparently terrified of something the camera never captured. Her passing was ultimately ruled accidental by the Los Angeles County coroner, attributed to drowning, with her diagnosed bipolar condition listed as a significant contributing factor. But questions persist. How did a 21-year-old woman access a secured rooftop? How did she remove a heavy water tank lid? And how did she climb into a tank accessible only by scaling a 10-foot ladder? Elisa was a University of British Columbia student from Vancouver, Canada, who had been diagnosed with bipolar condition and managed her symptoms with prescribed medications. She was traveling solo through California, a journey she had planned carefully, documenting her experiences through social media and her personal blog. She checked into the Cecil Hotel, located in a rough section of downtown Los Angeles, on January 28, 2013. The hotel was infamous as a place where notorious individuals Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger had stayed. The building had a reputation for attracting troubled individuals and had been the site of numerous unfortunate incidents over decades. Elisa initially shared a dormitory-style room with other travelers. After roommates complained to management about her behavior, describing it as odd, including leaving notes requesting others to leave, she was moved to a private single room for the remainder of her stay. On January 31st, she spent part of her day visiting the last bookstore in downtown Los Angeles. Later that evening, she was captured on the Cecil Hotel's elevator surveillance system in footage that would eventually be viewed millions of times. The recording spans approximately 4 minutes. In the footage, Elisa enters the elevator alone and begins pressing multiple buttons on the control panel, seemingly trying to make the elevator move. She steps back into the corner, partially hidden, as if trying to hide from someone in the hallway. She peers cautiously around the elevator doorframe into the hallway. She enters and exits the elevator repeatedly, each time checking the hallway, each time seeming to expect someone to be present. She makes unusual hand gestures with her arms and hands. The elevator doors, which should close automatically after a few seconds, remain open for an extended and inexplicable period. The footage ends with Elisa apparently leaving the elevator and walking away. She was never seen alive again. For 19 days following her final appearance on surveillance footage, Elisa remained missing while the hotel continued operating. During those 19 days, guests began complaining to the front desk about various problems with the water. The water pressure throughout the building was noticeably low. Water coming from taps appeared discolored, showing brown or black tinting. Perhaps most disturbing in retrospect, guests reported the water had an unusual, unpleasant taste that made them reluctant to drink it or brush their teeth with it. Some reported the water smelled odd. Despite these complaints, it took over 2 weeks before maintenance investigated the rooftop water storage system. On February 19th, maintenance worker Santiago Lopez went to the hotel's rooftop to investigate the ongoing water complaints. The roof housed 4 large cylindrical water tanks that supplied the building's plumbing. Lopez climbed the ladder to check the tanks and noticed one of the heavy lids was not properly secured. When he looked inside that tank, he discovered Elisa's body floating face up in the water. She was unclothed, with her clothing items and personal belongings floating nearby around her body. Police were immediately called. The discovery made international headlines within hours. The autopsy conducted by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office found no evidence of physical harm, no signs of inappropriate contact, and no recreational substances. Comprehensive toxicology analysis showed she was significantly under-medicating with her prescribed bipolar medications, taking far less than therapeutic doses, or had possibly stopped taking them altogether. The official determination was accidental drowning, with her bipolar condition listed as a significant contributing factor. The working theory was that Elisa experienced a severe episode related to her bipolar condition, possibly triggered by her failure to maintain her medication regimen. In this altered state, she somehow accessed the rooftop, climbed the ladder, removed or displaced the heavy lid, and climbed inside before drowning. Critics of the official determination raised questions about the physical logistics. How could someone experiencing a severe episode lift the heavy tank lid? Estimates suggest it weighed approximately 20 pounds or more. The tank was accessible only by climbing a 10-foot ladder, not positioned directly next to the tank when her body was discovered. The rooftop access door was supposed to be locked and alarmed. Tracking animals brought during the missing person investigation had searched the rooftop, but apparently did not detect her presence, though this could be explained by the closed lid containing scent. The Cecil Hotel closed permanently in 2017. The building sat vacant before being renovated and reopened in 2021 as a facility providing affordable housing, attempting to give the building a positive new purpose. In 2024, the property was listed for sale. A documentary series examining Elisa's case renewed public fascination, but offered no new answers. What was Elisa doing in that elevator for 4 minutes? Why did the doors malfunction? How did she access the secured rooftop? How did she remove the heavy tank lid? And how did she end up inside a water tank requiring significant effort to access? Millions have watched those 4 minutes of video, analyzing every gesture, searching for clues. Yet none of it explains how Elisa Lam ended up in that water tank, or whether her passing was truly as accidental as authorities determined. If you've made it this far and enjoy deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. While Elisa's passing was ruled accidental, the next case involves a diver who entered an underwater cave and seemingly vanished into its depths. Ben McDaniel. On August 18, 2010, Ben McDaniel entered an underwater cave at Vortex Spring in the Florida Panhandle and seemingly vanished. Despite 36 days of searching by 16 expert divers who explored every accessible passage, his body was never found. Yet no evidence suggests he left the spring alive. The 30-year-old's disappearance sparked theories ranging from a cave diving accident to foul play to a staged disappearance. 14 years later, the mystery of what happened to Ben McDaniel in those dark underwater passages remains unsolved. The Tennessee native was recovering from a divorce and a failed business venture, staying at his family's beach house in Florida while trying to figure out his next steps in life. During this period of transition and uncertainty, he became obsessed with cave diving at Vortex Spring, a popular diving destination in Ponce de Leon, Florida. He lacked proper cave diving certification, but frequently bypassed the locked gate installed at the cave entrance, a barrier put in place after 13 divers had perished in the cave system during the 1990s. A sign at the entrance depicted the Grim Reaper and carried a stark warning in capital letters, stating there was nothing in this cave worth losing your life for. Ben ignored these warnings repeatedly, diving into the cave without proper training, without the required certifications, and often without informing anyone of his plans. On the evening of August 18th, employee Eduardo Terran unlocked the gate for Ben around 7:30 in the evening, allowing him access to the restricted cave system. Terran and his co-worker Chuck Cronin watched from the surface as Ben descended into the water with his dive lights illuminated, heading toward the dark cave entrance approximately 20 feet below the surface. Then they did something that would later be questioned extensively. They left the area without waiting for Ben to surface from his dive, assuming he would exit the water safely and lock up when he finished. Ben's truck sat in the Vortex Spring parking lot for 2 full days before anyone reported him missing. When employees finally checked the vehicle, they found his wallet inside containing between $700 and $1,100 in cash. His cell phone was there. His driver's license was present. Detailed cave maps showing the underwater passages were spread across the seat. Everything suggested Ben had intended to return to his truck after the dive. Veteran cave diver Ed Sorensen, widely considered one of the most experienced cave recovery divers in the world, was called in to search for Ben's body. Sorensen searched to a depth of 1,700 feet into the cave system, pushing 200 feet farther than Ben's own maps indicated he had ever explored. In the deepest, most remote sections of the cave, Sorensen found 3 scuba tanks labeled with Ben's name and identification information. But there was no body, no dive equipment beyond the tanks, no signs of a diver in distress. Sorensen later made a statement that would become central to the mystery. He said the last place he searched was pristine, completely undisturbed, without a single mark or disturbance that would indicate a diver had ever been there. His professional assessment was unequivocal. He was not in there. How could Ben's tanks be deep inside the cave system while his body was nowhere to be found? How could the cave passages beyond the tanks show no evidence of a diver passing through? If Ben had drowned in the cave, where was his body? And if he never entered the deep cave sections, how did his tanks get there? The mystery deepened considerably when Vortex Spring owner Lowell Kelly passed away under suspicious circumstances in January 2013, allegedly after falling downstairs at a cookout. The timing and nature of his passing raised immediate questions. Kelly had been cooperative with investigators initially, but had grown increasingly evasive about certain questions regarding the night Ben disappeared. Ben's father believed Kelly had been involved in something sinister, stating publicly that he thought Kelly was eliminated over what he knew about Ben's disappearance. A private investigator hired by the McDaniel family developed a theory that Ben's body had been removed from the cave before authorities were notified of his disappearance. This theory suggested that someone, possibly Kelly or others with access to the spring, had recovered Ben's body from the cave and disposed of it elsewhere to avoid liability or to cover up something that had happened. The investigation considered several possibilities. One theory suggested Ben had successfully exited the cave that night but encountered foul play on the surface, possibly related to the large amount of cash found in his truck or to debts he allegedly owed. Another theory proposed he had staged his own disappearance to escape his financial troubles and start a new life elsewhere. Though this theory struggled to explain how he would have placed his tanks deep in the cave system without being seen. A third possibility was that Ben had suffered a diving accident, drowned in the cave, and his body had become wedged in a passage too narrow or remote for even expert recovery divers to locate. Cave diving experts noted that bodies in underwater caves can become trapped in tight passages, silted areas, or side tunnels that are nearly impossible to search thoroughly. In 2013, the state of Florida issued a death certificate for Ben McDaniel, officially declaring him deceased even though no body had been recovered and no definitive evidence of his passing had been found. While Ben vanished in an underwater cave, the next case involves a woman who reported being terrorized for 7 years before being found deceased in disturbing circumstances. Cindy James. For 7 years, nurse Cindy James reported being terrorized by an unknown individual. Threatening phone calls came at all hours. Her pillows were slashed, phone lines were cut, and she found deceased animals left at her home. She was discovered bound and unconscious on multiple occasions. Police investigated approximately 90 reported incidents over those 7 years, conducting one of the most expensive investigations in British Columbia history, spending approximately $1.5 million Canadian dollars. They found no evidence of a perpetrator despite extensive surveillance and investigative efforts. Then on June 8, 1989, she was found deceased in the backyard of an abandoned house, hogtied with a black nylon stocking around her neck, having passed away from a lethal overdose of morphine. The question that haunted investigators then and remains unanswered today is whether Cindy James was a victim or the architect of an elaborate 7-year deception. The 44-year-old pediatric nurse had separated from her husband, psychiatrist Roy Makepeace, in 1982 after 6 years together. The reports of harassment began approximately 4 months after their separation. The incident started with threatening phone calls, a male voice telling Cindy that he was watching her, that he knew her schedule, that she would never be safe. The calls came at random times, day and night, making sleep difficult and keeping her in a constant state of fear and anxiety. Then the incidents escalated beyond phone calls to physical intrusions and threats. Over the following 7 years, the pattern of incidents became increasingly disturbing and violent. Cindy reported finding her pillows slashed with a knife while she slept in her bed. Her phone lines were repeatedly cut, isolating her from potential help. She discovered deceased cats left on her property, a psychological tactic clearly designed to terrorize her. Multiple separate occasions, she was found unconscious in various locations, bound with nylon stockings or rope around her neck, sometimes with visible injuries. In one particularly disturbing incident, she was discovered with a paring knife stabbed through her hand, pinning a handwritten note to her hand that read, in capital letters, "Now you must die." She survived 3 separate fires at her residences over the years, fires that investigators could never definitively prove were set intentionally, but that fit the pattern of escalating threats against her. Under hypnotherapy sessions conducted by mental health professionals trying to help her recover suppressed memories or information about her attacker, Cindy made a shocking accusation that would cast a long shadow over the entire case. She claimed to have witnessed her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, involved in taking the lives of a couple and dismembering their bodies on Thormanby Island back in 1981 before their separation. She provided specific details about the alleged incident during these hypnotherapy sessions. However, investigators who searched Thormanby Island and surrounding areas found no bodies, no physical evidence, no missing persons reports that matched her account. The accusation against Makepeace could never be substantiated with any physical evidence or corroborating witnesses. Psychologist Dr. Anthony Marcus, who evaluated Cindy extensively during this period, diagnosed her with possible dissociative identity disorder, a condition that can cause gaps in memory, identity confusion, and in some cases, behaviors the person may not consciously remember performing. As the years progressed and the incidents continued without any arrest or identification of a suspect, some investigators began developing a theory that Cindy was staging the attacks herself. They noted that she was never seriously injured, despite the apparently violent nature of many incidents. The bindings, while looking dramatic, were always loose enough that she could theoretically have applied them herself. No witnesses ever actually saw an attacker. Security cameras and police surveillance never captured anyone approaching her property or following her. The evidence of an external perpetrator simply did not exist, despite the most intensive investigation British Columbia had ever devoted to protecting a single individual. On May 25, 1989, Cindy picked up her paycheck from work following her normal routine. She was last seen depositing the check at a bank automated teller machine at 7:59 in the evening, captured on the bank's security camera, looking calm and normal. 2 weeks later, her body was discovered in the backyard of an abandoned house in Richmond, British Columbia. She was hog-tied, with a black nylon stocking wrapped around her neck multiple times. And she had passed away from morphine overdose at 10 times the lethal dose, an amount so high it would have caused her passing within minutes of injection. Spray-painted graffiti on a fence near where her body was found read in crude letters, "Some female expired here." The message was clearly written recently, the paint still relatively fresh. The coroner's inquest into Cindy's passing became the longest in British Columbia history, lasting 40 days and hearing testimony from over 80 witnesses. Forensic experts, psychiatrists, police investigators, family members, friends, and colleagues all testified about what they knew. The jury heard evidence about all 90 incidents over 7 years. They examined the physical evidence from her final scene. They reviewed her medical history and psychological evaluations. After considering all this evidence, the jury could not determine whether Cindy's passing was self-inflicted, accidental, or the result of actions by another person. They returned a verdict unprecedented in its ambiguity, officially listing her cause of passing as by unknown event. Roy Makepeace was thoroughly investigated as a potential suspect, but was never charged with any offense related to Cindy's passing or the incidents preceding it. After Cindy's passing, her sister discovered a medical syringe kit and a glass cutter in Cindy's purse, items that seemed to support the theory she had been staging at least some of the incidents herself. The case was officially closed in 1989 with no resolution. While Cindy's case involved years of reported incidents, the next case features an individual who called a family for years after taking their daughter. Dorothy Jane Scott. Dorothy Jane Scott's individual who was following her made a chilling promise over the phone. He told her that when he got her alone, he would cut her up into bits so no one would ever find her. On the night she disappeared, that threat became reality. For 4 years afterward, the individual responsible continued calling her parents on an almost weekly basis, tormenting them with hints about their daughter's fate, until her skeletal remains were finally discovered in 1984. The 32-year-old single mother worked as a secretary in Anaheim, California, while raising her 4-year-old son Sean with help from her parents Jacob and Vera Scott. Beginning in late 1979, She began receiving anonymous phone calls at work from a man who professed affection for her, then turned increasingly threatening when she did not reciprocate his feelings. The caller clearly knew intimate details of her daily routine, her schedule, where she went, what she wore. He would call and describe what she had done that day, what she was wearing, where she had been, demonstrating that he was watching her constantly. She found deceased roses left on her car windshield on multiple occasions. A romantic gesture turned sinister by the anonymous nature of the gift and the clear surveillance it implied. Frightened by the escalating harassment, Dorothy moved 3 times in relatively quick succession, trying to escape her follower. But each time, the calls resumed at her new location within days, proving he was tracking her movements and locating her new addresses. The threats became more explicit and violent. He told her directly over the phone that when he finally got her alone, away from witnesses and help, he would cut her body into such small pieces that no one would ever be able to find her remains or identify her. Despite reporting these threats to police, no arrest was made. The caller was too careful, keeping calls brief to avoid tracing, never revealing identifying information, never making contact in person where witnesses might see him. On the night of May 28, 1980, Dorothy drove a co-worker to the UC Irvine Medical Center emergency room because he had been bitten by a spider and was experiencing a severe reaction. She waited with him and another colleague while he received treatment. Around 11:30 in the evening, she told her 2 co-workers she was going to bring her car around to the emergency room entrance so her sick co-worker would not have to walk far to reach the vehicle. Both co-workers watched from inside the hospital as Dorothy's white Toyota Celica suddenly appeared in the parking lot and sped directly toward them with headlights on full beam, then veered sharply at the last moment and exited the parking lot at high speed. Neither co-worker could identify who was driving the car through the bright headlights. They assumed Dorothy was driving erratically because she was upset or rushing, not realizing they had just witnessed her being taken. At 4:30 in the morning, Dorothy's car was discovered burning in an alley approximately 10 miles from the hospital. The fire had destroyed most potential evidence inside the vehicle. Her remains were not discovered until August 6, 1984, over 4 years later, when construction workers stumbled upon scattered bones in the Anaheim Hills area during excavation work. Her watch, still attached to the skeletal wrist bones, had stopped at 12:30 in the morning on May 29th, approximately 1 hour after she was last seen alive at the hospital. Throughout those 4 years, while Dorothy's family desperately searched for her and had no idea whether she was alive or deceased, the individual who had taken her life continued to call her parents. The calls came almost every Wednesday, timing them for when he knew Dorothy's mother, Vera, would be home alone. The calls were always too brief to successfully trace with the technology available in the early 1980s. Sometimes he would claim to have Dorothy, saying she was alive and being held. Other times he would claim he had ended her life. He provided details about her final moments that had never been made public, details that confirmed he was the individual responsible. When the Orange County Register newspaper published a story about Dorothy's disappearance, the same caller phoned the newspaper's offices and made a statement to the reporter who answered. He stated directly that he had ended Dorothy Scott's life. He said she was his love. He claimed he had taken her life because he caught her being unfaithful with another man, a claim that was completely fabricated as Dorothy had not been in any romantic relationship. Most significantly, the caller provided specific details about the circumstances of her passing that had not been published in the article, confirming he possessed knowledge that only the individual responsible would have. The tormenting phone calls stopped in April 1984 after Dorothy's father, Jacob, answered the phone instead of her mother. The caller apparently only wanted to speak with Vera and ceased calling when he realized Jacob might start answering. However, the The calls resumed after her remains were discovered and identified, proving the caller was monitoring news coverage and knew when the discovery had been made public. Both of Dorothy's parents passed away, Jacob in 1994 and Vera in 2002, without ever knowing who had taken their daughter's life or who had tormented them with years of phone calls. Dorothy's son, Sean, who was only 4 years old when his mother disappeared, has dedicated himself to finding answers as an adult. He believes strongly that the individual responsible was Mike Butler, a man who worked across from Dorothy's office and allegedly had an obsession with her that colleagues noticed and commented on. Butler passed away in 2014, taking any potential knowledge of his involvement to his grave. The case remains officially open with the Orange County Sheriff's Office, which published an updated review in January 2026, noting investigators are using artificial intelligence to analyze digital footprints from 1979, hoping modern technology might identify patterns or connections that were missed decades ago. But the individual who terrorized Dorothy Jane Scott and then tormented her family for 4 years has never been definitively identified or held accountable. While Dorothy's case involved a single victim, the next case represents one of the most brutal family annihilations in American history. The Dardeen family. The Dardeen family incident stands as one of the most brutal unsolved offenses in American history. Keith Dardeen, his pregnant wife Elaine, and their 3-year-old son Peter were attacked in their mobile home near Ina, Illinois, on November 18, 1987. The baby girl Elaine delivered during the attack was also harmed. The individual responsible used Peter's own birthday present, a baseball bat, as the weapon. The scene was so disturbing that Federal Bureau of Investigation profilers who examined it stated the offense defied their typical analytic methods and psychological frameworks for understanding such incidents. The family lived in a mobile home on a rural property near Route 37 in Jefferson County, a sparsely populated area of southern Illinois. Keith, 29 years old, worked as a water treatment plant operator, a stable job with regular hours. He had grown increasingly concerned about rising incidents in the area. There had been 15 such incidents in Jefferson County in just 2 years, an alarming rate for such a rural community. Keith had made plans to move his family to Mount Carmel, hoping to find a safer environment. The weekend before the incident, he told his mother directly that there were just too many things happening in their area and he needed to get his family somewhere safer. Those words would haunt his mother after what happened just days later. On November 18th, Keith failed to report for his shift at the water treatment plant, behavior that was completely uncharacteristic for someone known as reliable and punctual. When he did not call in or answer phone calls to his home, his supervisors became concerned. That evening, Keith's father agreed to meet sheriff's deputies at the mobile home to check on the family's welfare. What they discovered inside would become one of the most horrifying crime scenes in Illinois history. The bodies of Elaine, Peter, and a newborn baby girl were found in the bedroom. Elaine had been bound with duct tape and attacked with such force that she went into premature labor during the assault. The newborn baby, who may have lived only moments after delivery, had also been attacked. All 3 bodies had been carefully positioned and tucked into the bed together, a disturbing detail that suggested the individual responsible had spent time at the scene after the violence ended. Keith's body was found the following day in a wheat field near Rend Lake College, approximately 5 miles from the mobile home. He had been shot 3 times with a firearm, and his body showed evidence of severe harm. His vehicle was discovered outside the Benton police station, 11 miles from the mobile home, with a blood-spattered interior that indicated he had been shot while inside the car. The sequence of events suggested Keith had returned home from work on November 17th, possibly interrupting something in progress or walking into a scene already in motion. He was apparently forced to drive somewhere, shot in his own vehicle, and his body was then transported to the remote wheat field for disposal. The crime scene yielded deeply puzzling evidence that made investigators question every standard motive and pattern. Nothing had been taken from the mobile home. Valuables including a video cassette recorder, a camera, cash money, and jewelry were left completely untouched and in plain sight. There was no evidence of forced entry at any door or window, suggesting either the family knew the individual responsible and allowed them inside, or the door had been left unlocked. The crime scene had been partially cleaned by someone, with blood wiped from certain surfaces, suggesting the individual responsible felt no urgency to leave and no fear of being discovered. Most disturbing to investigators was evidence suggesting the perpetrator had spent considerable time at the scene, both during and after the violence. Federal Bureau of Investigation Behavioral Analysis Unit profilers, who examined the evidence and crime scene photographs, stated on record that this offense defied their typical methods of analysis and their established frameworks for understanding motivation in such incidents. In 2000, an individual named Tommy Lynn Sells, who was on Texas death row for other serious offenses, confessed from prison to being responsible for the Dardeen family incident. Sells claimed Keith had invited him to their home and propositioned him inappropriately, triggering his rage and violent response. However, investigators who traveled to Texas to interview Sells extensively found numerous problems with his confession. He gave inconsistent accounts of what happened, changing key details between interviews. He could not correctly identify important aspects of the mobile home's layout or describe the scene accurately. He could not provide information about the offense that had not been publicly reported in news coverage. Most significantly, he could not explain how he would have gotten to rural Illinois from Texas, or how he would have left the area afterward. Sells was executed in 2014 for other confirmed offenses, but he was never charged with anything related to the Dardeen family incident because investigators did not believe his confession was credible. Keith's mother, Joanne, became a tireless advocate for justice for her son and his family. She collected 3,000 signatures on a petition requesting that the case be featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, hoping the national exposure would generate leads. The show's producers declined the request, stating the incident was too brutal for their daytime television audience. Joanne passed away without ever learning who had taken her son, daughter-in-law, grandson, and the granddaughter she never got to meet. 37 years have passed since that November night in 1987. The case remains with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, which maintains over 20 binders filled with investigative files, witness statements, forensic reports, and evidence documentation. DNA samples from the scene have been preserved and remain in evidence storage, waiting for the day when advancing technology or a new lead might finally identify who was responsible. The Dardeen family's mobile home was eventually removed from the property, but the land remains. A quiet, rural plot where an entire family was erased in a single night of incomprehensible violence that has never been explained or solved. While the Dardeen case has remained cold for decades, the next case saw a major breakthrough in late 2024. Beverly Jarosz. For 6 decades, the brutal ending of 16-year-old Beverly Jarosz's life remained Ohio's longest-running cold case. Then in late 2024, Garfield Heights police announced they had identified a person of significant interest. A male who was approximately Beverly's age when the incident occurred, a well-known friend who spent time in her home regularly, and someone who was known to regularly carry a knife and rope. The announcement came after advanced DNA testing yielded new genetic material from evidence preserved since December 1964. The Marymount High School junior was a quiet, studious individual who preferred classical music to the rock and roll popular among her peers and aspired to become a Latin teacher. In the weeks before her passing, she received anonymous gifts, including a ring and a bracelet, both left mysteriously at the back door of her family's home, with no note or identification of who had left them. The family also received 10 to 12 hang-up phone calls daily, the caller never speaking, just breathing on the line before disconnecting. Both Beverly and her mother Carol reportedly told family members they felt dark forebodings, an inexplicable sense that something terrible was approaching, though they could not articulate what they feared or why they felt this way. On December 28, 1964, Beverly returned home alone around 1 in the afternoon while her parents were both at work, following her normal routine during the school holiday break. Her close friend Barbara Klonowiecki arrived at the Jaros residence at 1:25 in the afternoon to pick Beverly up for a planned shopping trip. Barbara knocked on the front door and rang the doorbell repeatedly for approximately 5 minutes. She received no answer, but she heard loud thumping sounds coming from inside the house and noticed music playing at unusually high volume, much louder than Beverly typically played music. Barbara assumed Beverly was angry at her for arriving late and was deliberately ignoring the door. Feeling hurt and confused by what she interpreted as Beverly's rudeness, Barbara left the property and went home. She would carry the guilt of that decision for the rest of her life. Beverly's father returned home from work that afternoon and discovered his daughter's body in her upstairs bedroom. She was lying face down on the floor, partially unclothed. She had been ended by strangulation with a 66-inch rope and had been attacked with a knife between 34 and 42 times, according to the medical examiner's count. She had approximately 12 defensive wounds on her hands, where she had tried to protect herself from the knife. The medical evidence indicated she had fought desperately for her life. Critically, there was no evidence of forced entry at any door or window in the house, strongly suggesting Beverly had opened the door willingly for her attacker, someone she knew and trusted enough to allow inside when she was home alone. The individual responsible had brought the rope to the scene, indicating clear premeditation. The rope was identified as a window sash cord manufactured by Shuford Mills Company, a common household item, but one that had been pre-tied in a square knot before arriving at the house, showing the attack was planned in advance. Beverly's personal diary was missing from her bedroom and has never been recovered. Investigators theorized the individual responsible took the diary because Beverly had written about them in its pages, possibly documenting uncomfortable interactions, unwanted attention, or her concerns about someone's behavior toward her. The diary might have identified her attacker directly. In 1965, just months after Beverly's passing, a man named William Rehard, who had been accused in an unrelated case, confessed to a detective that he was responsible for Beverly's ending, directed the detective to a bus station locker where he claimed to have hidden evidence, including a trimming knife and Beverly's clothing items. Rehard voluntarily submitted to a polygraph examination and passed it without any physiological indicators of deception. However, before investigators could question him further or verify details of his confession, Rehard took his own life. The evidence he had directed them to was allegedly destroyed at some point after his passing, though records documenting exactly what happened to that evidence and why it was destroyed have never been located. The December 2024 announcement by Garfield Heights Police revealed that advanced MVAC DNA testing technology, which can extract genetic material from evidence that traditional testing methods cannot process, has yielded new DNA profiles from evidence preserved since the original investigation. Police stated they are conducting active surveillance and undercover operations focused on the person of significant interest. This individual, who was approximately Beverly's age in 1964, was a well-known friend who regularly visited the Jaros home and was known to carry both a knife and rope. Investigators revealed that this person's alibi for December 28, 1964, had significant inconsistencies when initially provided. Additionally, associates of this person have refused to cooperate further with investigators or answer additional questions, behavior that has raised suspicion. Beverly's sister Carol, now in her 70s, has lived her entire adult life waiting for answers about what happened to her younger sister. The investigation remains active and ongoing. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.